Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's nice to have a full house. And welcome to our today's expert talk that is part of the exhibition A Matter of Gaze that you can see around yourself. And we have also the artist here. It's a solo show by Nina Liller. So if you have after the talk also questions about the exhibition, you can talk to her directly. And just to bring a bit of a context, the show is, or the entire project speaks about the relationship between mental health and education. And during the expert talks, we are looking at the different aspects of how the education can be affecting the mental health and how diverse the needs of the children are. And today we are speaking about autism and masking. And we have two guests, so thank you very much for coming. We have Glew here, who is working in IT and using his autism to give him edge in his work, and he also is dedicated to understanding the neuronormative social behavior. And we have Hristina Hristova, who is an assistant to autistic children, and we will be talking more about the psychiatric side of the process and the requirements. And they are both part of the organization, non-profit organization in Spektrum, and in the end we will be also talking about their project, their work, and how we can support them as well. So I would start with Morgan, if that's okay. And you were diagnosed relatively late in life, which also, of course, had effect on you. Can you share at what age this was?
I don't remember exactly what age it was, but I think it was around 18 or 19, one of the two, pretty sure of it even. Yeah, at that time I had already quit school. It wasn't working whatsoever for me to continue going to school like that, because at the time I had depression, and yeah, it was a problematic time for me.
So basically you experienced the entire compulsory education without this diagnosis, which means also that without getting any support for your needs. Can you, so I will get the questions that I should pick properly. Yes, can you describe the main issues that you were experiencing in the beginning, let's say? It was also a bit specific, you told me already about the type of school, so maybe this is worth to mention as well.
Well, initially I started going to school Austrian school, a typical Catholic Austrian school, and this was kind of problematic because they were very traditional, and everyone had to work exactly as the teacher said. It was very opposite of how I function, because I remember specifically the math teacher. So there was this problem that I had with division. I didn't understand how division works, because the method that she was showing me was just completely strange, and still to this day is extremely strange to me. And well, I asked my mother at the time, and she showed me how she does it, and it was super simple to me. I could immediately pick up on it and then show the teacher my homework using my mother's method. All of the results were obviously correct, but it was wrong, because it was not what the teacher taught. And so it didn't matter what the results were, it was that I was not showing how she wanted me to show.
So there was more importance on the way it is done than if it is done correctly, exactly. If the result is correct. And so when you are looking back, because this is also something that is more general and is problematic in the school, that really the individuality of children is not like acknowledged and supported. But when you look back, where there's something that was like that you can now recognize as a specific sign of autism.
Well, I mean, generally just in every way I seem to be somewhat different from others. Not alien per se, but it was just the things that I would think of were completely different from what everyone else would think of. My humor was completely different, and back then nobody exactly found it very funny, except me, which has changed a lot with time, but that's another topic. But yeah, I just couldn't understand everyone else, and nobody could understand me, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, except my mother, because my mother and I are extremely similar to each other, so yeah, that's a different situation in that sense.
So how did you cope with the situation while you were there?
Well, at first I didn't really cope with it. I just sort of tried to ignore it, I suppose. And that obviously didn't work out. Started to get bullied more and more. And, well, things started to get more rough at one point even, where it came to the point of even getting physically violent. I never really cared for, acting out my violence out of my own personal frustration. It was always only because I wasn't being left alone. And so when I was being left alone, I didn't care about the others, because why should I? And yeah, it was a difficult time for me. It's about the time when I started to develop depression as well.
Very, very understandable, and we don't need to talk about it more. But
It's
maybe
fine.
we can.
I'm not sad about it or anything.
Yeah.
It's not a sensitive topic.
But then you changed the school
Mm-hmm.
to international school,
Yeah.
and despite still not being diagnosed and not having specific support, the situation has changed. Can you tell a bit about your experience there and what was different? And
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the reason behind the change was because one of the teachers was actually encouraging the bullying, and that's when my mother recognized that this isn't going to work. We went to the director then, and the director said that they're basically going to not do anything about it. And that's why the decision came to change schools. Now, when I changed schools, it was to this international school. It was completely different. Not only the system, but the people were all entirely different. In terms of the teachers, I think I just got exceptionally lucky because I didn't have a single bad teacher, I think.
mm-hmm.
Everyone was, perhaps there were a few grumpy teachers, but only to a reasonable degree, in my opinion. But everybody was nice. But what was special was the fact that everybody had completely different backgrounds, and because of that, nobody really cared too much about the differences, because everybody had the differences. The fact that I had a different sense of humor was sort of a given, because everybody else also had differing senses of humor, and we sort of had to make do with the common ground that we did have.
So you were not feeling so excluded or like different?
Well, even then I wasn't really fitting in with the rest of the crowd, because there were still groups forming and such, but it wasn't to a point where people would bully me, really.
Mm-hmm.
It was much more comfortable because I was completely left alone, or at some point even started to make friends with, the outcasts, essentially. And so we formed our little group of everybody who didn't fit in a group.
And so, as we are talking also about this like phenomenon of masking, was this like present? Like, can you recognize it now, looking back, that you were masking your behavior? And
well, at the time with the Austrian school, it was pretty much only starting to develop, but you know, once I had switched schools into the international school, that's when it really was taking effect, I think, which is part of the reason why I was also left alone, I think. Because, you know, I was able to adapt enough that people didn't think that I was exceptionally weird. Which I feel like people still think I'm weird in a sense, but I'm at least able to make it seem acceptable.
And so, when we fast forward and talk about now, like how is your life now? How does it change, like after the diagnosis? Like, has it gotten better? Do you have assistant?
Yeah. So after I got a diagnosis, it was not even a month had passed before I had completely been absolved of depression. Honestly, it was like snapping my finger, and I immediately felt better because I now had an answer to why there was this weird difference between everybody and myself. And yeah, after that then still was a little bit shaky because I was trying to understand myself. Still am. It's not a process that you ever finish, honestly. But yeah, I feel like I'm actually accomplishing things now, and I also have an assistant from Autism. Well, I don't know if assistant is the right word.
We don't know what the right word is.
I mean, direct translation from German would be assistant, but that also sounds like a secretary or something. That's not what I mean. I mean, sometimes I treat her like that, but it's a joke. So. It's just a joke. Yeah.
So can you maybe give some examples of what she helped you with?
Well, contrary to how it might sound with me receiving assistance, it's not a matter of like helping me with complicated topics in self-discovery or something. It's just a matter of oftentimes there's certain things that, you know, me lacking the normal common sense that most people have, I don't understand how to do, or might have difficulties doing because I, for example, have certain anxieties and such that are a bit outside of the norm. But it's very helpful for me, honestly, because you know, sometimes I have to go buy something specific, for example, which doesn't sound difficult, but I get this weird anxiety about it, even though I know nothing bad is going to happen from going to the store or something. And so she comes with me and helps me organize my thoughts into what I actually have to do as well. And yeah, it's just extremely helpful for me, who is naturally chaotic.
Yeah, no, thank you. And before we get more into the assistant part, we were talking a lot before this talk about the masking, and that you don't think so negatively about it as it's usually like communicated, especially from people who have maybe like higher support needs, that like the masking can be really exhausting. But you kind of embraced it, and you also mentioned that you believe in this like cultural exchange and understanding the neuronormativity. Is there anything, because you said it in a way that it's not so exhausting when you know what to expect from the situation, so then it's like the mask itself is not so problematic, it's about like just knowing what kind of mask to put on. Yeah. So is there anything that could people like, you know, like make it easier for you to know what to expect from the situation? Like, something that you would find helpful to know how to act going into situations or events that would like support you?
Well, that is a difficult question because it depends heavily on the circumstances, honestly. But depending on what's happening, first of all, knowing what exactly I'm going to do outside of interacting with that person as well. Because if it's just a conversation, it's one thing, but then even it depends on what the conversation is about. But I might not just be conversing with them, I might also be busy trying to do something else, in which case the circumstances also change. And knowing this context is extremely important for being able to predict how someone will generally behave. You can't completely predict it, obviously, but to have a general idea isn't something that you need to be a genius for, per se. And yeah, then also knowing their personality helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's much easier for me to communicate with people that I've at least met once compared to people who I've never seen in my entire life. Because then I understand at least surface level details about how they behave, even if it's not how they really are in reality. That doesn't matter, because what I care about is how they are gonna react, not the details of themselves necessarily. Because anyways, it sort of shines through. It's never possible to entirely mask.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a thing that I try to myself incorporate in how I mask. Because there's this, as you were saying, the negative thing about masking, that people see it as a negative thing. Well, that depends on how you do it. If you're just masking by trying to hide everything about you and only keep this facade of yourself in front of everyone,
mm-hmm.
it's going to be difficult. It takes far more energy, and it's just not efficient. It's not the real you. On the other hand, what I try to accomplish is not hiding everything, but instead trying to adapt how I appear to other people. I'm not trying to completely hide everything. I'm not hiding, for example, that I'm perhaps not quite what you would consider normal.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because depending on how you adapt, how that comes out, that can even be a good thing, because then people, instead of saying that you're weird, say that you're interested. And that's what I try to accomplish. I try to show everything in a good light about myself, or at least an acceptable light. And when you do that, you certainly don't have to try to put in so much effort into masking, because you're only doing half the effort to adapt the worst parts to make them not as bad, and make the best parts perhaps look a little bit better. It saves energy.
Thank you. Is there at this point something I haven't asked that you would like to mention? We will still talk a bit about the project and about differences in neuronormativity and autistic brain, but if there is something else, we can also mention it now.
This type of question is always difficult for me, because I can never think of something else.
I know. Okay, then we can skip, and I would then switch to Hristina. You work as an assistant.
Since we don't have a better word for it, or we couldn't find a better word, like in German it's Förderung, for whoever understands it. Yeah.
Can you maybe start with like what is the requirement? You studied in Austria, right?
I studied in Austria. Yeah, and we are using, like me and his assistant as well, or whatever the word for it is, are using a method that we had to do an extra curriculum kind of. That's not a university one. It's a special, different kind of studying that you have to pay, and it's around 2 years, I believe, if I have it right in mind. It's called TEACCH, you write it with 2 C's. And we're using the TEACCH methods, but normally you need some kind of other education. So you can learn this and practice it afterwards. It's mostly either pedagogy, like some kind of educational science, or psychology and psychotherapy and stuff like this.
So this is like a bit more free in terms of like if you do the course, like does it matter, like is there a list of specific degrees that you need to actually practice it then?
No,
or is
no,
it
you just have to be in the psychosocial kind of studies somehow, yeah. But yeah, it's kind of more free.
Okay. And so what is your like current situation, or how do you work, like in which kind of setting?
Depending on the day, but most of the time is that I have appointments for the day with children that they come on one-on-one setting. In between there are some parents talk and stuff like this, and we work like specific on topics that are relevant for the children. Like I work with children and teenagers, but yeah, more children than teenagers. And sometimes we have small groups that I do with another colleague of mine, where we go more into the social skills and stuff. And I also have a few hours where I'm not self-employed. Like normally I'm self-employed for the few hours per week. I also work in a school assistance there, have a contract and everything. There I go to school and work in the school with the child. I have only one student left because he's finishing school up next year. Yeah.
So is it like general situation in the schools is more that the school employs an assistant, and then if they have children that need the assistant is there for them, or does assistant come with the child, like would a parent, for example?
If there is a child that the school decides needs an assistant, they require it, like they get it. So the assistance comes specifically for the child.
But is it like through school? Like
there is an external organization that is connected, like that works with the school, but it's an external organization that's officially the employee of the school assistants.
But is it still that like the school needs to take care of it? It's not like the parents.
They need to require it. Sure, they have to write. We need an assistance for this child. Yeah.
Is it provided like for free?
Like,
yeah,
for sure.
So like,
yeah, sure.
And
like the children don't pay for it, like also their parents not.
This is one of the things that we were talking also about in the previous talk, that the teachers are not really informed in the sense, like in general sense of mental health, and then also like the symptoms. And when we have the schools that are very like normative, then it's really difficult to like know what needs to be done.
And I also feel like especially like I don't notice it that much in the school where like requirements as assistant, but from the private clients that I have, that I'm quite often required from parents and stuff to talk to teachers in schools, because they, even though there is a diagnosis, we have it, it's an autistic person, they still have extreme problems, because a lot of teachers, I believe they want to help but don't really get what does it mean, because autism is not something that you see as any other neurodiversity. You just don't see it, and therefore we are living in a society where you're used to explain a behavior in a very bad way. So it's like, it's so bad, the parents are bad or something like this, but no one really thinks about, okay, but we have a diagnosis, it's probably autism. It could be that it just, and sometimes there are like, quite often there are big things, of course, and there is a lot of work required, but sometimes there are like very small things where you just need to put the headphones on the child, or like something like this. Like sometimes it's very simple to, to solve the problem, and they're still going into being dramatic, and the child is so loud or whatever, or aggressive or anything, but they don't go into the problem. So I think quite often it's like really the missing information, because I want to believe that teachers want to help, but yeah, quite often it's like really the missing information about, because when there is a behavior, there is a reason behind this behavior always, doesn't matter if you're neurodiverse or neurotypical or whatever, if there is a behavior, there is a reason behind this behavior, and they just have a kind of a weird explanation. That's like the most common explanation that we get for like the last I don't know how many generations being told like, yeah, bad raised or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now because you work like mainly in this like outside of school settings, can you tell a bit more about how this work, and especially how, like, what you can as an outside, like assistant outside of school, like maybe compensate for what the child is not getting in the school, like to support it, or is it not related to this at all?
No, like quite often it's related, of course, because children spend most of their time in school. Like if you take the sleep away, they spend a lot of time in school. So quite often it's sexually related, and we work quite early on. Like at least like the idea of the TEACCH method is that you work quite early on one-on-one setting, and you check what this child needs, parents and stuff. But what's needed there, and there is not like a program, and everybody does this program. And quite often they're like the social skills, but there you're again working with the child and not with others, so you expect the person to change, but not the school setting or so. But of course we're trying to work on this stuff where we help the children also, like when we talk about the relationship to school, like not in private, we don't change clients, but when we're talking about the school relevant topics, we quite often work on how the child can be a bit better, what can we teach it, how, like mostly it's social skills actually, you have to be honest.
And is it like how does it relate to the masking then? Because is it like are you teaching the child to like to cope with it in a certain way, or is it really about just like how to?
Or like that's a good question. I don't think, I hope not. I think we are like, at least I'm mostly trying to like really explain different, because quite often there is like, if I may use a sentence from a talk that we had, this like they come to school and he feels like everybody has this manual and everybody has a secret for like from you, what others know and you don't know, like that kind of stuff. And I feel like that's what we're trying to explain sometimes in one-on-one setting, like what's the reason behind this situation, what can you do there, like that kind of things, like more explaining and training it, because in autism, like I don't feel like I have to say it that way, but for a lot of autistic people, this natural development of the social skills is not there. Autism is a lot more than than having a hard time with social skills, but that's a part of it, and we're trying to explain it more or less, like to train it, like. But I don't like. I hope we're not teaching masking. Like I really hope we're not teaching masking.
I'm sorry for that.
If I may say something. So, this is just my opinion about it, though, but I feel that masking anyways is perhaps because of how it sounds, it has like a negative connotation, but it's actually just a fancy word for normal communication. Anyone masks, everyone masks. It's a matter of fact. It's just that instead of saying that we mask, we say things a little bit more friendly, we try to say things in a way that people don't misunderstand them. That's what masking actually is, from my perspective at least. But, that's not what we call it usually. And that's why I feel also that people should be teaching more towards people in the spectrum what social skills exist and how to use them, so that they're capable of saying the same things that they would normally say, but in a way that other people won't misunderstand them as they normally do.
Yeah, and also maybe sometimes having the explanation why people behave a certain way, why is it socially acceptable. But there is a very simple example which is like the most basic thing, but something like face expressions, which we feel like it's the most natural thing, but like I feel like it's the most natural thing because I learned it by doing. A lot of the clients that I have, not everybody, but a lot of them are like really having hard time different, like where is the difference between the face expressions and stuff. And that's something very basic that we start learning. But also when we talk about school, it's quite often also like the things after school, you know, like the writing the homework and stuff. There's a certain self-organization skills that you're required, that you quite often don't have, not only with autism, by the way, where we also are trying to help with motivation and stuff, because, yeah, that kind of stuff, like. But we're like really going on the other way of the environment. Like talking to the school is a good idea, but doesn't always help. Like if there is a problem, we're like, I'm quite often required to, like from the parents, to talk to the teacher, which by the way parents pay for themselves, to talk to the teacher to explain the situation and stuff. And some are very often like very open for it, and they actually accept it, and they're very happy for the help. But some people are like really, like sometimes I met teachers that are like really, no, there's just another reason for the behavior. He's too spoiled, or like that kind of things. That's just absurd. Yeah.
And to change this, you work in an organization that is focused on this, communicating the neurodivergent experience. So can you talk now a bit more, maybe start with, like you already started with this, like the differences in like understanding, like facial expressions and so on, but maybe also with the project, because it has like multiple parts. Like, what is it that you want to communicate specifically?
We actually made the organization especially for the project, because we couldn't find someone that we felt like we want to work with them. So we decided to make it ourselves. The idea is that autism is a spectrum. That's why it's called a spectrum. And we want to, like, we have in the team a lot of autistic people as well, but also parents that are having autistic children that are, for example, non-verbal, therefore obviously can't speak for themselves. And we are some professionals, not a lot. And we want to somehow present the autistic experience like as good as we could. It's like fully clear that it's not that easy, and probably we would never represent it that good, because even working with people every day, all the time, I feel like I'm not sure that fully understand autism. Like I'm obviously like not fully understanding it, because it's a different kind of seeing the world, maybe. How would you describe it?
I mean, simply put, or from the beginning.
How would you describe autism?
Well, there's a common misconception that it's, either you're autistic or you're not autistic, or the other misconception of one person's more autistic and the other is less autistic. It's one person has more of certain aspects and less of another aspect, and the other person has, again, a different mixture of aspects, but none of it is like identical, really. There's certain things that repeat themselves commonly, but even those can occur differently than with a different person. Like, personally, don't have quite as many issues with sensory type issues, but I've heard that it is not exactly uncommon for a lot of autistic people to have problems with bright lights or certain sounds, such things. I mean, I do have a problem with one specific sound, which is balloons. Any sound a balloon makes is extremely off-putting to me for whatever reason, but otherwise I don't have personally very many things that are exceptionally bothersome for me sensory-wise. But that's just an example of how this is completely different from what other people say. But both I and those other people were all autistic. Can you say I'm more autistic or less autistic? I don't think so.
I think that's a
Doesn't make
quite
sense.
often misconceptions of the idea if there is someone non-verbal, they are more autistic than the verbal ones. I think that's like what quite often makes me a bit angry because like no, they're just it's a spectrum, like it's like really a spectrum therefore. But yeah, the idea is that we somehow represent the autistic experience, and therefore we're hoping that we can make like a mobile bus or something where you can, like this is more on the sensory kind of, like on the sensory topic where you can experience different kind of sensory stimulations that are a bit extreme, and you have to do some tasks under the stimulation just to make the experience for a bit. And with this mobile thingy, the idea is that you get also some kind of a workshop with it about autism and stuff. Parallel to it, we are hoping to make an online platform with information about autism, but also with interviews and podcasts with autistic people or parents or like anybody that's involved in the story, partners, and to present like really not someone talking about them, but really they talking about themselves or like, some kind of things. And at the end of this, we are hoping to actually make like a proper exhibition where there is a lot more than the sensory, because like when autism is represented somewhere, it's mostly the sensory issue, and obviously it's not always sensory things. And autism is a lot more than sensory stimulation and social skills development. It's a lot more. So therefore, we're trying to represent it somehow. We hope it will work. Yeah.
I mean, my personal opinion on what it is exactly is if you say that the neurotypical person stands within a certain box, then the autistic person would be standing outside of that box. It's not a matter of everyone standing outside the box and seeing the same face of the box. Everyone is standing from all kinds of different viewpoints and different distances from the box. And so nobody has the same exact perspective of the box. But they have no idea what it looks like inside the box because it's closed. Meanwhile, the neurotypical person sees pretty much everything inside the box. And so they usually more or less understand each other because even though their perspectives differ somewhat, it's more or less similar. But they have no idea what it looks like outside because they're inside the box. And this is how I see it, at least.
So to get the neurotypicals out of the box, you have this project, but it's not running yet, right?
No, we are looking for money.
But what is the, like, at what stage you are at, or what is your, like, what are your roles in the project? How do you work together on it? Because you are both part of the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, we're actually in a, I would say, quite good stage of the project because we like really exactly know what we want to do it. We know how we want to do it. We're just looking for the different possibilities how we can finance it because obviously it's obviously we need money for it. We work in like there are kind of small groups where everybody's in a one or two groups depending. And some people are there just to bring their perspective more and more in every part of it, which is very important perspective before we do something where it's, again, I don't know if you know autism. What was the organization? There's this American organization about autism where every autistic person hates it because it's very...
Autism Speaks.
Autism Speaks. I always wanted to say Autism Talks, but it's wrong. Autism Speaks. So we obviously don't want this. Therefore, we need people that support us, like where, like clearly, this is true, this is not true, and stuff like. But yeah, that's like mostly the idea. Everybody's in a different group. I'm in the social media, like in the online group, and at some point at the exhibition.
Is there a way for people to like join or support you, or outside of like organization who can actually finance you, but is there something that...
We're happy to see any idea, like if someone has an idea where we can get the finances or who we can talk to and stuff, we're always open to that, and we're very happy, and we got a lot of nice contacts exactly in these ways. Otherwise, there is, every time we're open for a new perspective on the things. For now, we are not looking for anybody on the team just because all of us are working for free so far. But I guess when we start running, we would be happy also to get some kind of different support. And neurodiverse people are always welcome to bring their perspective. Really, always. That's because that's what we need. We don't need a lot of professionals being there and talking about their work. It's just the connections that we made. But we mostly need neurodiverse people coming and saying their stories. So the moment we start working, we're also happy for anybody who wants to give us an interview or join the podcast or write something for the website or at some point our Instagram page when we develop it. But yeah.
You mentioned the website, so the website is running and people can...
We have the website. There is nothing going on in it so far. This thing is on it. But you can take it here as well. But we have this on our website where you can download it. Otherwise, from now we don't have stuff, but we want to start soon writing a few informations that don't require a lot of work, because as I said, we are all doing it on the side. But yeah, we hope to start developing it soon, and we also hope to get financing soon. So sponsoring or whatever we get. Not whatever, we're kind of strict because we don't want to be associated with some organizations and stuff, so therefore we're really trying to make it in a good way this time.
Nice. Well, fingers crossed for the projects. Everyone who wants to learn more, we have more of these beautiful designs that you can take a look at and take with you probably.
Also, thank you for Rune for making it for Christmas here, because she also made it. Yeah.
And before we get to the questions from the audience, if you are okay with that, one last thing: if someone outside of the project who would want to support the cause or do something to change the situation regarding the lack of information or the lack of inclusivity in school, is there something to start with? Or what would be your recommendation? What can an individual go and do right now?
Inform themselves about the topic and tell other people about the topic, and really it's kind of hard, and I'm still having quite often hard time understanding simple situations. But it's really sometimes when you feel like something is very annoying, take a second, not only about autism but anything, take a second and think behind every behavior there is a reason, and there could be a very good reason for someone not answering a message, not writing an email, not being a bit unsocial on the street or whatever. People are not always mean, but mostly educate yourself and understand that there are a lot of reasons for the behavior, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's really not. Most of the time, it's not a bad thing. Most of the time, it's a very it's just a different situation or a different way of seeing the world. I don't know how to explain it, but most of the time there is a different reason behind it. So inform yourself about not only about autism, about any kind of neurodiversity, about depression, about anything, because it's way too much in our society that we're ignoring it for way too long. But yeah, and if you want to help us somehow, we're always happy. We read our email quite often, so just text us and we would be happy to. Because sometimes there's really come here and talk about it, or we have an idea how we can support it and whatever. We're open for anything. Yeah. Thank you.
Would you like to add something?
Well, the only thing I'd perhaps add is that the thing that frustrates me most is that the way people seem to blow off this problem, because they seem to think, well, it's not like it's the majority of people, but it's actually a pretty large group of people, surprisingly large. And more than that, while it's true that not every single one of us is exactly a genius or something, we each have strengths that are quite remarkable, honestly. Each and every single one has some sort of strength that stands out above perhaps neurotypical. In exchange, we have certain weaknesses, of course. It's not like we're all powerful and exceptional, but we do stand within at least our specific field above the average, which is why I find it so frustrating, because that's a very large group of very valuable people.
Thank you.
I just forgot something important, because he said we're not all geniuses, and I remember obviously we want people to make the experience so they may better understand the autistic perspective, but also a big topic for us is those clichés about people being geniuses and Raymond or whatever it is. It's also a big topic for us that we show that it's not always true, somehow represented. All of these clichés are not really true about autism, because people have ideas about autism and they're really extreme most of the time. Really these very extreme ideas where you have 1 in a million that's like this. It's not a real statistic, don't but really you have this idea because they knew one person, and there was this this sentence that I heard from somewhere, that when you met an autistic person, you met one autistic person. It's really, it's a really spectrum. But also the clichés are a big.
Thank you. Thank you very much both for being here and talking to us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, then we'll wait for the microphone.
Thank you. I think in the beginning I heard something like that you found in your job also a way to deal with certain issues, and I'm not sure if we talked about that. I would be interested in that, if you want to talk about that.
This is to me, right?
Yes.
Well, there's quite a few issues that I initially had, which are one after the other found out how to solve, but it strongly depends, obviously, on what the issue is. But for me, one thing that has been a gigantic issue for the longest time, since the time I was in school, all the ways into work as well, which I was lucky I had some employers that were very understanding, but I always fell asleep. It's understandably problematic when you fall asleep in the middle of your job, or in the middle of class, or in the middle of anything, because normally you're trying to stay awake for a reason. But I found out later, well, first of all, in school when that happened, the excuse was, well, I'm not resting enough at night. At that time it was still understandable, because being a kid I would stay up all night playing games and stuff, but then when I wouldn't be doing that, it would also be happening. But nobody talked about that. Then the next excuse was, oh, it's because of the depression, and I'm feeling more tired because of the depression. And I got the diagnosis, still feeling tired, but I'm not depressed anymore. Then finally, at some point, someone said, maybe it's not such a simple problem of sleep. And I went to a sleep lab. And that's when I was finally diagnosed with narcolepsy. I'm right now on meds, so I'm not having any issue with that. But after taking that, it immediately wasn't a problem. Now I could work, no problem. And work suddenly was a lot more fun as well, because I wasn't feeling tired and grumpy. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I don't have this problem personally, but I know some people who do have this problem with sensory, with their hearing, that they don't like it when it's too loud in their environment, they can't concentrate. It's one solution that I've been told about is just putting on noise-canceling headphones. It's a surprisingly simple solution. It doesn't work in every situation because sometimes, perhaps if you're still in school, it might be problematic to put on some headphones in the middle of class. But, well, you have to look at this current situation and sort of come up with a solution. But honestly, I feel, especially with the sensory issues, there's almost always some sort of solution. It's just, you have to look for it. It's not always an easy solution to find, but it's not always a complicated solution either.
We talk about social skills, and for me, it feels that it has to come from both ways. It's like it's unfair that someone has to learn some kind of social skills in order to cater for me or someone else. So maybe you have few tips or like something, like a direction maybe, to say like what neurotypical people could learn to meet the social skills that are like, you know, I know it's a hard question, but maybe there's like some kind of a thing.
No, it's a good question because like in the project we actually wrote somewhere doing on the website social stories. Like social stories is something that we use quite often in the one-to-one work. But to make social stories for neurotypical with the idea to explain situation from the other side, like how does it feel? Food, chips, I'm really not sure what would, like maybe you can say from your perspective.
Got some ideas, but I can't say with guarantee that this is necessarily enough. But for one, well, a lot of the time, a typical behavior, which is funny to say with a group of people who are markedly atypical, but typical behavior you see a lot of the time is being very blunt. This doesn't always come over very nicely because, you know, as I said before, you can say, or maybe I didn't say it quite clearly though, but you can say the same thing a million different ways, but not every way is good and not every way is bad. And it's very common for them to just say it just the way it is. And so, you know, if someone's bad at something, we'll say as much. You're bad at it. And then that is very rude normally, but they may not experience it as rude because they may have meant you're kind of bad at it. You should try improving.
Yeah.
It may have actually been positive feedback from their perspective, but that's only one thing.
I would also say the misinterpretation is a good example. Like also sometimes with the intonation, how people speak, because that's also quite often a problem. Just don't try not to misinterpret what people say, because don't go on people for being exactly rude, or I don't know. Sometimes it's very basic, eye contact, and that's why he's rude or she's rude.
So kind of not to jump into some
conclusions, especially if you that's the thing, you don't see it. Autism is not something people don't go and here and there, but don't jump into these extreme conclusions. I would also say with anybody, because you never know what's the reasoning behind it. A lot of autistic people don't know that they're autistic, maybe this don't jump to conclusions very fast. And especially if you know it, there is
I think it would be nice to have a social skill vocabulary or tips for neurotypical people.
Yeah.
It has to come from both ways.
I'm pretty sure that it's written somewhere actually. This like really these social stories for neurotypicals, we have it as a like part of the project. At some point we will, because the idea of the website is to be more interactive, so people can work with it. Yeah.
I mean, that's honestly a good point, since I wanted to mention something about this earlier as well, that for me, I feel the differences are similar to how there's cultural differences and language barriers that exist. Just because you're speaking the same language doesn't necessarily mean that you understand each other, because there's a lot more to communication than just talking. So it can be difficult on both sides, so it's sort of, you have to meet in the middle for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other question?
I just wanted to express gratitude, like I'm super thankful for this event and that you're talking so openly about this topic and that you're putting up creating this scheme spektrum, because I think in Austria, I think there's not so much awareness around that yet, and yeah, I can see that with like my niece is autistic, she has ADHD, I have ADHD, maybe autistic as well, I don't know that yet, but yeah, it's just so incredible to see, I don't know, just to see this happening, because I can see, like, for example, my niece is struggling so much in school, although she has a diagnosis, and it's just kind of these problems like repeating over and over again because of lack of awareness, and I think, yeah, what you're creating here is really, really, really good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think this was a very beautiful ending, and thank you so much everyone for coming, for being here, for talking to us, and for listening and asking questions. And if you want to keep talking in a more private setting, I think everyone is still staying for a bit. Thank you.